Hello! Welcome to Ignite Liverpool, number 15. It's crazy. It's almost 4 years or something. Where's the time going? I'm not reminiscing. We want kind of get on some interesting talks, not me rambling about rubbish at the start. So, I'm Adrian. I'll be your compere for the evening. So hopefully you won't hear very much of me, and you'll mostly hear from all sorts of really interesting and varied topics, although quite intellectual this evening. You're going to go home having learned things, I hope, probably. Might not be useful things, but we can't promise everything. If you haven't been to Ignite before, welcome. Basically, it's a kind of series of really short talks, people talking about what they're passionate about, and the format is that you have 20 slides, each slide shown for 15 seconds. And if you're taking too long, Dan will come down and blind you with lights. And basically you have no say over when the slides advance, so the talks will just take 5 minutes. So if one, for some reason, doesn't really take your fancy, don't worry, in 5 minutes somebody will be talking about something completely different. Although maybe just about faces. There's lots of stuff about faces this evening. But I think different ways, faces in different forms or something. You'll find out. So we'll have 5 talks, and then there'll be an interval where you can get a beer, have a chat with people, compare notes on which talk you thought was best, whatever. And then we'll kick off the second half, and there'll be another 4 talks in the second half as well. So one other thing that I should probably mention is that at the start of the second half, if there's anybody who's got an event coming up or a project that they want to just kind of announce to a whole load of interesting people like yourselves, then we have 1-minute pitches. So at the start of the second half, we'll do a thing. If you've got something, an event you want to talk about, come and find me or one of the other, head down to the mixing desk and the cameras and stuff at the back and find somebody who looks responsible. Or failing that, Neil or Dan or Lydia or Randall. And tell them you want to give a 1-minute pitch, and then we'll do a few of those at the start of the second half to kind of let people pitch stuff that they're up to. So let's get on with some talks. And our first talk is a veteran Ignite speaker. He's lost count as well now of how many talks he's given at Ignite, which is good, because I can never remember. I think I lost count about 3 talks ago. 8 or 9 or something. And this is the kind of perils of tweeting about Ignite talks, because he was bored, and he'd already tweeted what he'd had for breakfast maybe, and tweeted that he wondered if he could give an Ignite talk about World War II. And of course we spotted that. And said, yeah, that sounds cool, we'll pencil you in. And so now here he is giving a talk about World War II. If you put your hands together for Tom Williamson.
Good evening, everyone. Now, I should start by saying there's no way I can do proper justice to the Second World War in 5 minutes. So this is just going to be a very, very general overview. With the Second World War, there were 2 main theatres. On the left, you've got the red circle, which is Europe and North Africa, centred mainly around Germany. And on the right, you've got the blue circle, which is the Pacific theatre, which is centred mainly around the Empire of Japan. So just going to a few slides with a bit of background. Empire of Japan is very expansionist, led by Hirohito, and by the start of the Second World War, it's already got an empire. It's got Korea, Manchuria, and Taiwan, and it's very, very outward-looking. It's trying to get control of resources. In Eastern Europe, you've got the Soviet Union, led by Joseph Stalin, which again is also expansionist. But Stalin became essentially dictator of the Soviet Union and strengthened his position with the Great Purges, where he killed or exiled hundreds of thousands of people. So he weakened the USSR. Now, Nazi Germany came to power. You really have to look at what happened in the 20s. Various things sort of really, really set the German economy back. It was really in the doldrums. So Hitler comes to power, a really strong man who says, right, we're going to tear up Versailles, we're going to transform the German economy, and of course he began persecution of Jewish people. Germany expands by annexing Austria. Neville Chamberlain tries to appease Hitler, proclaiming peace in our time, but Hitler invades Czechoslovakia, and the invasion of Poland starts the Second World War. One of the first things to happen was something that was commemorated recently here in Liverpool, the Battle of the Atlantic, which is where both sides could blockade each other. German U-boats attack a lot of Allied shipping, and this lasts until the end of the war. The early stages in Europe, Poland ends up getting split between Germany and USSR, according to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and of course Winston Churchill replaces Neville Chamberlain. The Nazis, having invaded plenty of European countries, used blitzkrieg tactics to flank the Maginot Line, go through the Ardennes Forest and invade France. And 300,000 Allied troops end up getting evacuated to Britain. But to invade Britain, Hitler needs to control the skies. So the Battle of Britain started between the Luftwaffe, German Air Force, and the RAF. The Luftwaffe failed to destroy the RAF, so they turned to civilian targets instead, and that starts the Blitz. Then you have a massive, massive game changer. Hitler invades the Soviet Union in Operation Barbarossa. The Soviet Union is massively unprepared for this, and the Nazis make huge gains, almost getting to Moscow, sieging Leningrad. Meanwhile, over in the Pacific, the Japanese want to neutralize any sort of threat from the USA, so they not only attack Pearl Harbor, they also attack Hong Kong. This is huge because it brings the USA into the war. The USA was neutral before this. Over in Eastern Europe, the USSR fights back. You have the Battle of Stalingrad, Battle of Kursk, which I think was the biggest tank battle ever. Huge losses for the Nazis, real turning points in the war from which they never recover. And the USSR just gains huge amounts of territory. Shortly after that, the Allies land in France in what's become known as D-Day, June 6, 1944. And as the Allies in the West sweep into Germany from Normandy, and the Russians make their way towards Germany, concentration camps liberated, and that reveals the obviously huge and horrible extent of the Holocaust. So the Battle of Berlin, the battle to take Berlin, is actually pretty much done exclusively by Soviet troops, and it ends up with the red flag flying over the Reichstag, Hitler committing suicide and ended up in a ditch covered in petrol on fire, and that's where we celebrate VE Day. But the War of the Pacific is still going on. The US military goes on what's called island hopping. They end up hopping from Iwo Jima to Okinawa, and the Japanese resort to kamikaze tactics, flying their own fighter planes into American ships. So the Americans drop a couple of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That leads to the Japanese surrender, and we commemorate VJ Day, and that was the end of the war. Of course, there's a huge amount I haven't talked about. I haven't talked about casualties, I haven't talked about North Africa, that was hugely important, Rommel, the Desert Fox. I haven't talked about Italy, Malta, Singapore. If you want to know more, please watch The World at War. It's an amazing documentary made in the 70s. I'm done already, aren't I? Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you very much for that, Tom. I like the way Tom, before he went on, had a very quick bend with me as to what Dan, who does the music and the mixing desk and stuff, often picks kind of themed music at the end of each talk. And Tom was right. He guessed right. The only thing I could come up with is, who do you think are kidding us to Hitler? As the other possibility.
That would have been better.
So Tom would guess that. That was great. I'm kind of glad that we weren't in the bombed out church or something. If we just reenacted World War II really quickly, luckily we were safe down here. And up second is a speaker who tells me that he's always up second, like whenever he speaks at something. So we didn't want to break with that tradition. And so now Graham Lamb is going to tell us about microfinancing in the developing world.
Hello, Wall Street. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about microfinancing in the developing world. I know there's lots of freelancing creatives with loads of spare cash around tonight, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what you might be able to do with some of that money if you want to help some people in another country. 1.2 billion people, roughly, in the world live on less than about $1 a day. And over 3 billion people live on less than $2.50 per day. Now, microfinancing it's a way of describing financial services to people who don't have a lot of money or those who don't have access to banking, basically. So they can't get money. They don't have money, they can't get money. It's a supply of loans, savings, and other basic financial services to the poor. So these are people who basically can't get money from banks. And we're thinking of in the developing world here. So it's the idea that low-income individuals, they're actually capable of lifting themselves out of poverty if they're actually able to get access to the money that they need in order to put particular projects into place to raise some money. And it's particularly productive for women in parts of the world. The lighter colours are the parts of the world where women generally are more disenfranchised from economic services than the darker colours. So banks, they're businesses. They don't lend to the poor because the poor don't make enough money for them. Managing accounts for the poor costs money, and they don't get much money. And frankly, banks were designed to be run for people who already have money. But there are some banks, like the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, and that was specifically formed to provide small loans to women. And Banco Sol in Bolivia actually provides microfinance services for poor people in Bolivia. Poor people, when they are able to get money from very difficult situations, 76% of rates for 14 developing countries, more than 10% per month, and 22% more than 100% per month. So there are a variety of organisations which have now been set up throughout the world which can help people to actually get access to finance in these countries for projects. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Kiva on the top left and some of the work that they're doing. It's a non-profit organisation. It allows individuals to make loans from as little as $25, about £16. There's almost 1 million people worldwide lending to Kiva, and they've already lent over $460 million in loans. 98.99% repayment rate, which is a pretty decent rate. 450 volunteers around the world, 72 different countries that they're currently working in. And I'm going to talk about a couple of projects. This one in Cambodia, where this group here, they were loaned $2,650 to buy more piglets, sorry if you're a vegetarian, also to purchase fertiliser and hire farm labourers to grow rice. 93 lenders wanted to commit to that project. 14 months they were allowed to pay it back. All of it was paid back within 11 months. They had the piglets that they needed for breeding. They had all the extra stuff that they needed, and so they're brought out just a little bit more out of poverty. Saeed in Kenya, he actually ran a retail shop and a grocery store. He wanted $1,425 to add stock to his shop, but also he wanted to open a hardware store as well, so people nearby could actually build things. 49 lenders throughout the world wanted to commit to his project. 9 months to repay back the money. He was able to repay back that money in 9 months. It's not perfect, but it is making a difference. Like in Vietnam, where Save the Children clients managed to reduce the food deficit from 3 months to 1 month. In Bangladesh, where some clients' income was 43% higher because of microfinancing than it was before. And in particular, it's raising the status of women in these developing parts of the world. I won't read all of what Rose says there, but it's very powerful. You have made me to be a champion out of nobody. It's a very powerful thing. Other ways in which these people can be helped are through grants, through infrastructure development, through employment programs, through functional skills, literacy and numeracy, through community programs and legal and institutional reforms. But actually, if you want to get involved in one of these organisations, from as little as lending $25, £16, you can actually get involved immediately in helping these people, picking a project in another part of the world, and actually helping people, male or female, to get out of poverty. Thank you.
Whoops. That's good. Thank you very much for that, Graham. It's nice to see like the worldwide project that's a bit more positive than the first talk. Actually, a bit more positive. That's just an understatement. Microfinancing, it's a bit more positive than World War. Maybe I should get in touch. Let them have that kind of tagline. So, moving swiftly on, our next speaker, Catherine Ford, is going to be telling us about why Sir Mix-a-Lot likes big butts. And so the only link I had for this was like Friends reference, which I don't know, dates me and it just doesn't look good, does it? So I think we'd like Catherine to come up and tell us something interesting about that instead.
Okay, so I absolutely love evolutionary psychology, and this is basically looking at people's behaviour and thoughts from an evolutionary perspective. And once you know how to do that, you can see evidence of our evolved psychology all over the place, including in popular culture. So, in 1992, Sir Mix-a-Lot released what was his seminal work, his magnum opus, if you will, Baby Got Back. In this wonderfully romantic song, Sir Mix-a-Lot makes a very bold statement and says, "I like big butts and I cannot lie." He goes one further than this and asserts that you other brothers can't deny that when a girl walks in with an itty-bitty waist and a round thing in your face, you get sprung. Now, from the context, I'm going to assume that to get sprung means to become sexually aroused. Strangely, Sir Mix-a-Lot's actually shown a great deal of insight here. While it's true that some aspects of what's considered beautiful in a female is very variable across cultures, one of the most variable aspects being ideal body size, and by that I mean overall BMI, some things are really, really consistent. And that thing is the waist-to-hip ratio. Now, the waist-to-hip ratio is the size of a woman's waist compared to the size of her hips. The sort of ideal is a waist that is approximately 70% the size of the hips. So that's a waist-to-hip ratio of 0.7. Now, if we take a look at some women who've been held up as physical ideals along the 20th century within the West, and specifically I'm talking about Marilyn Monroe, Audrey Hepburn, Twiggy, Madonna, Kate Moss and Angelina Jolie, you'll notice their overall build looks very different. Their weight varies, the size of their breasts, waist and hips vary, but if you do the calculation, going off this information I've got here, all of them, their waist-to-hip ratio falls within the range of 0.56 and 0.72. So that's the ideal shape for a fertile woman. Now, it's very, also, over the past 30 years, all women who have won US beauty contests and women who have been featured as Playboy centerfolds over the past 30 years have all had a waist-to-hip ratio of approximately 0.7, despite the fact that their overall size has varied. And in British, Indian and Chinese culture, going back hundreds of years, small waists are consistently described as beautiful. Right. A waist-to-hip ratio is a sexually dimorphic trait. Up until you hit puberty, men and women have a very similar body shape. However, at puberty, a woman's body gets flooded with estrogen and she starts depositing fat around the hips and arse area, whereas men stay pretty much straight up and down. Interestingly, waist-to-hip ratio actually correlates with how fertile a woman is. So women with a waist-to-hip ratio of around 0.7, actually between 0.6 and 0.8, tend to be much more fertile than women with waist-to-hip ratios above that weight. So, when Sir Mix-a-Lot is looking at a woman with a small waist and big hips and thinking, whoa, hey, he's actually shown a sexual preference for women who are fertile. This actually gives people an evolutionary advantage. If, for whatever reason, you are much more attracted to women with a small waist-to-hip ratio, you're actually attracted to women who are fertile but unfertilized. This can give you an evolutionary edge. Therefore, men who are mating with this shaped women are increasing the likelihood that they're going to have offspring. Then, if their offspring inherits their father's love for women whose waist is small but curves are kicking, they are much more likely to have kids. That way, this preference begins to multiply throughout the population. And it's very important that the waist-to-hip ratio is an accurate indicator or a reliable indicator of fertility, because otherwise, paying attention to this trait wouldn't give you any evolutionary advantage at all, and this preference would just simply be arbitrary. So, Sir Mix-a-Lot, it turns out, likes big butts because it gave his ancestors an evolutionary advantage, and therefore he has inherited this desire for women of a special shape, and I said that far too fast.
Thank you very much for that, Catherine.
Dance!
I've been in touch with Sir Mix-a-Lot and sort of suggested some new lyrics for him. You know, I like big butts and I need to give me an evolutionary advantage. Mine scam quite well, but maybe it could be a B-side. Right. So from big butts to economics. Our next speaker, it's just all over this. Big hitting topics tonight at Ignite. Our next speaker is Sean McHugh, and he's going to help us stamp out economics.
No, we mustn't stamp out economics. Economics is terribly important. We run an advanced economy, we need economists, and it's a science. It uses advanced mathematics with not just figures, but also numerals and symbols. And you can't get much more. This computer is doing me in it. Listen, Skynet Junior, show us a page of mathematics. That's the kind of thing that we need. Nothing more convincing to an audience than a page of mathematics that they can't understand. That tells you that it's science. There you go, that's what I'm talking about. Look at that. Astrology, what are you doing to me? Look at that. Look, okay, I see where you're going with this. What you're saying is that astrology uses funny mathematics, but you can get a BSc in economics. Accurate prediction. Well, we can't do accurate. But you can get a Nobel Prize in economics. How scientific is that? You're bound to be scientific with that. Come on, give us the Nobel Prize stuff. There you go. It's in the original Swedish scribble. And for those of you not too familiar with the Swedish scribble, we put it down as 5 prizes: physics, chemistry, medicine. Shouldn't economics be in there? I'm sure there's an economics Nobel Prize. What's going on here? And there's there's 6 of them. 5 prizes, 6 blokes. What's going on? You've got to give us a clue. Come on, Skynet Junior. Give us a clue. What's going on with the prizes? What's going on? Come on. Come on, move it. There you go. Oh, you stole me. There's a fake Nobel Prize. How could anybody do that? That's impossible. Could I just slide in a prize for, say, astrology or something like that? Could I just slide it in and nobody would notice? In memoriam of Alfred Nobel. Oh, dear me. You mean nobody's noticed that there's a fake Nobel Prize? Who would do such a thing? You know, what kind of people would go in and put a fake Nobel Prize? There's no need for insults, you know, so what are you doing? Okay, that's me. Okay, help stamp out economics. I'm not having this. I'm finished with economics. Not doing anything more to do with economics. This is wrong. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. We still have an economy to run. Well, look, there's millions of economists out there. Somebody must have got that catastrophic failure. They must have predicted it. Who predicted it? I mean, if they were all monkeys, somebody would. Oh yes, that's his friendly face. Hallelujah. We've got your man, Rubini. He predicted it. How did he do it? Did he calculate or guess? Please don't tell me he just guessed. I know, just going to take that. Oh, that's so good as well. He just did the same prediction every year for 10 years. We can't have that. That's rubbish, that. You know, you can't have a guy with a sandwich board running the world economy. That's no good. What we need is a bit of lift here. You mean somebody else did predict this? Well, who? Some pointy-headed physicist. You know, that would be fine with me. You know, show me the man, come on. Oops. Sorry about that, girls. Julian, I've seen her on Newsnight. She's a financial journalist. What's her background? What discipline did she do at uni? You know, did she do something dead special, like astrophysics? Oh, come on, an anthropologist? It hasn't even got numbers in. She's milking goats in Central Asia. How does that learn you anything? Because this is impossible. You know, how did she work out the thing? All right. This is getting unduly mystical. You know, she's listening to silencers. How does that help you predict anything? Come on, give us a clue. Come on, give us a clue. Come on. Oh, I saw that movie. Oh, I see what you're getting at. Okay, right. The thing that's most important, you don't say anything about. Yeah, I understand that. But we still got an economy to run. How do we run the world? Oh, yeah. Quantum mechanics is difficult. Quantum mechanics has never been wrong. Economics is not difficult. Economics is wrong. Now, Skynet Jr., just give up. There you go, give it up. Quite right. And what we need to do is swap in history, social psychology, anthropology, anything else, but not economics. Economics is the Norwegian blue of academic disciplines. It's gone. Help stamp out economics. Help stamp out economics. All together now. Help stamp out economics. Help stamp out economics. You've been a great audience. Give yourselves a round of applause. Very, very much.
Thank you very much for that, Sean. Hopefully, I think they're still going to be applying economics and having to trade money for goods and stuff at the bar during the interval, just as a heads up. But before we get to going to the bar, we've got one more speaker for you in this first half, and that's Mike Pennington, who thought for a second that Ian Rush was going to be here talking about Mike Pennington. It turns out Mike's not quite famous enough yet. So maybe in like Ignite 20 or something, we'll get Ian Rush on here to talk about Mike. But Mike's going to be here instead, telling us about Ian Rush.
I have to apologise first of all. There's no science of Ian Rush involved in this talk. First of all, I'm an editor and freelance writer. I generally write about the arts, design, film and music. But when Dan foolishly asked, or kindly asked, if I'd like to talk at Ignite, I jokingly replied that I would. I'd love to do a presentation on Liverpool Football Club legend Ian Rush, my childhood hero. I rethought that and thought, well, sure I should do that's me and my little brother in our Liverpool kits in Christmas '88, I think. I rethought it and thought, no, sorry, I'll go and do Ian Rush. As I said, these days I spend a lot more time looking at and writing about the arts, film and music for doublenegative.co.uk and others than I do about football. But football was my first love. I know it started with a throwaway joke that seemed the perfect excuse to tap into this. More specifically, my first love was actually Ian Rush, which was point out was a platonic love entirely, despite his very fine moustache. So I'm kind of the perfect age and demographic to be an Ian Rush and Liverpool fan. I'm 35. And when I was growing up, Liverpool, it wasn't a fading diet. We didn't have an idiot fighting and most likely racist Luis Suarez to haggle with. It was an institution, a well-oiled machine, trying for winning matches. And at the spearhead of that well-oiled machine was Ian Rush. He was lethally efficient. The greatest goal scorer in the club's history and arguably the best British goal scorer of his generation. I think I'm going too slowly here, so I'm going to move on to two of my finest memories of Liverpool and Ian Rush was two FA Cup finals, both against Everton. The first in 1986 and the second in 1989. In the first, I came up against a great kind of parallel striker, Gary Lineker of the previous slide. But before the second final in '89, he had a year in Juventus where he struggled in Italy and essentially a quote has been attributed to him saying he didn't like it, didn't fit in because of all those foreigners. But when he returned to Liverpool, it was kind of as understudy to John Aldridge. And that second FA Cup final I referred to was 1989, following the Hillsborough disaster, which my uncle actually attended, but fortunately returned from, unlike 96 other fans of Liverpool Football Club. So when the final was eventually agreed to be played, initially, it was suggested that maybe we shouldn't play the final. And it came down to Liverpool and Everton, and ultimately John Aldridge and Ian Rush. Aldridge scored the first, with Rush again playing understudy from the bench, but filling in, came on in extra time and scored twice to decide the FA Cup final, like he had done so in many of the games. Rush was also part of the last Liverpool squad to actually win the Football League, which kind of dates me and dates Liverpool Football Club essentially quite drastically. Moving into the 90s, he displaced Aldridge and the challenge of Aldridge, and continued to score goals for Liverpool. But eventually he displaced himself by the form and startling arrival of Robbie Fowler, who took on the mantle of the lead goal scorer of Liverpool Football Club. Sorry, I'm ahead of the slides. So, as I said, moving into the 90s, basically Rush continued his career with Liverpool until 1996, when he moved on a free transfer to Leeds. He also finished as the Wales international top goal scorer with 28 goals in those appearances. But my ultimate memories of Ian Rush, it's not so much about his goals, as it is kind of the halcyon days of my childhood, when I didn't have to worry about watching Liverpool and the relief of a win, as opposed to the fear of a defeat and the ensuing 3 days of horror that followed for me and anyone around me. These days he hangs around Anfield with his buddy and old goal scoring foil, Kane Dalglish. He also basically hooks up the Wu-Tang Clan every now and again, which I know about thanks to Dan. Rumours of a re-recording of the Anfield rap with the Wu-Tang Clan. There's been absolutely no speculation about that, unfortunately. But ultimately what I remember is happy Christmases and happy times. There's me and my little brother in our Liverpool kits again. And I apologise for the lack of science and the 100% passion of my love for Ian Rush.
Thank you very much, Mike. And just, although I'm a Liverpool fan, kind of similar vintage, grew up watching us in the kind of glory years, there's nothing to do with Ian Rush's tash and my tash. Right, scotch those rumours. Right, so that brings us to the end of the first half. So we're going to take a kind of 20-minute break. So you can all go and get a beer or whatever beverage you like. Have a chat with the people around you, kind of trade stories about the first half, what you liked. Work out what you're going to give as your Ignite talk when you come back and talk in a few months. And if you do want to give a talk, come and see one of us and let us know what you want to talk about. And any 1-minute pitches, come and find me and tell me what they are. But see you all in 20 minutes.
This is brilliant.
So you have more fun, that's great. So before we crack on with the talks proper for the second half, we've got two 1-minute pitches, and so we'll kind of crack on with them instead. And so our first 1-minute pitch is Tom Darlow, who's going to tell us about an event called Demo.
I haven't prepared for this, so I'll keep it brief. Demo is an event for people who are either working on or who are interested in products and ideas. The next event has just been confirmed for the 26th of September.
Yay!
So
That is awesome!
get that. Yeah, for more information, it's letsdemo.it, and you'll find out more information on the website. Thanks very much.
That was, yeah, it'll be the second demo that they're running. The last one was really good. Like lots of really cool products being done in some technology sort of focus sort of thing. It's really cool. Definitely come on to that. And our second 1-minute pitch is a former Ignite Liverpool speaker talking about giving us a brief 1-minute update on how things are going for the thing that he gave an Ignite talk about. So Zarina, talking about the Awesome Liverpool.
Hello everybody. Who was here and saw the awesome Liverpool pitch? Excellent. Drinks for these people. No. Yes, we do a thing called Awesome Liverpool, and we are a group of 10 trustees who each donate £50 a month to make awesome things happen in Liverpool, and they have to solve a problem and come in on budget and be joyful. And since I did my talk, we've had 3 awesome projects in Liverpool. We've had one called Home Advantage Liverpool of an awesome woman called Lynn who's trying to set up like an Airbnb around Anfield and trying to get her neighbours behind that because there's so much to Anfield more than just the stadium that's there, and it's really cool. We've had some people from a bit of Liverpool that I can't remember who were trying to gather money to paint the shop fronts and the shutters along this street. Because it's a bit of a rundown area and they want to try and reinvigorate it and get the local school and kids involved with it and the uni, and that was really cool. And the third one, which I think is the most awesome one, and I love it because I love ukuleles, at least now, was we have funded a group called the Ukuloopies, who are going to teach like little kids to play ukuleles, and they look so cute. I mean, it's just brilliant. So there's loads, and we're basically looking for more awesome ideas. So if you've got an awesome idea of something to do in Liverpool and you just need a little bit of backing and some money to get it off the ground, we are your people. Find us on Facebook, Awesome Liverpool, or Awesome Live on Twitter and whatever. You'll find us. Awesome Liverpool, I'm Zarino, there's loads of trustees, and we'd really love your ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Serena. And one almost 1-minute pitch that I'll do because they couldn't make it down. If you're a girl or a woman and into technology and being a bit geeky, then the first ever Liverpool Girl Geeks is tomorrow evening. I can't remember exactly what time it starts. 6. Excellent. Some people in the audience who know more than I do about it. Do you want to come and give a 1-minute pitch about it? And it's a women's organisation which is kind of out into the Baltic Triangle. Liverpool Girl Geeks is a Twitter account, so I'm sure you'll be able to find information about it and go on to that tomorrow. Right, on with our regularly scheduled programming. And our first talk of the second half is Paul Hopwood, who's going to tell us about common sense and whether it's common and whether it makes sense. So if you're welcome to the stage, Paul Hopwood.
Thank you, you're beautiful too. Right, good evening everyone. Straight in at the deep end with me. By the end of this evening, I hope that you will have all made yourself a promise to start using common sense as little as possible. Now, I can understand if that causes some degree of consternation in the room, but I think it has several major flaws which most people don't actually seem to be aware of. Now, this problem was first drawn to my attention by my master supervisor, who one day said to me, "Common sense says that many hands make light work, but also that too many cooks spoil the broth." And I didn't hear what he said after that because I was too busy having a moment of enlightenment. How can such a fundamental human cognitive tool be so heavily relied upon when it can so blatantly contradict itself? So what I hope to do in the short time we have together here this evening is to convince you that common sense isn't actually that common, doesn't make that much sense, and in some cases is even just flat out wrong. But before going any further, I feel it would be helpful to have a working definition. And by far the best one I've come across is the one given by Duncan Watts in his wonderful book. So I'm going to take you through that, and then I'm going to look at 3 of his practical examples in order to back up my argument. So what Duncan did was to contrast common sense with science. Now, science is a purely theoretical pursuit. It wants to come up with answers, and it wants to know how and why it got them. Contrast that with common sense, and it is something that is very, very practically minded. You don't need to know how or why you got the answer, you just need to have it. Secondly, of course, scientific research is something where data is collected from specially selected population samples. And that data is then analysed and generalised in order to try and come up with scientific theories. Again, contrasting that with common sense, its answers are very specific and have a very narrow degree of generalisation. If you don't get the joke on that slide, then shame on you. So, now that we've got our definition down, let's start looking at some practical examples. And the first one was a study that was introduced by sociologist Paul Lazarsfeld, which claimed that American soldiers who grew up in rural areas dealt with army life much better than those who grew up in big cities. Does that make sense? Well, that's very interesting you should say that, because that's in actual fact the complete opposite of what the study found. But that was the whole point that Lazarsfeld was trying to make. If every answer and its opposite is obvious, then quite clearly there's a problem. Right, audience participation time. We're going to do a quick thought experiment. I want everyone on the left, you sir, to imagine that I've given you £100. And without discussing the matter, you have to make a cash offer to somebody on the right-hand side of the room. If your offer gets accepted, happy days, you split the money, you both go home. But if the offer is rejected, then I take the whole £100 back. So on the count of 3, I want everyone on the left to shout out what offer they're going to make, and everyone on the right to shout out what the minimum offer they will accept is. 1, 2, 3. 50! Yeah, and therein lies your problem. If common sense really was that common, I would have expected you to all come up with the same answer. Furthermore, you will all have had different reasons as to why you chose the number that you did. But of course, if you have to explain that to somebody, that means that your answer didn't just make sense to others. So that's not being common and not making sense. To finish off with, I want to look at a very famous example of common sense just getting it plain wrong. And this is taken from an American game show that was very popular in the 60s and 70s, and is called the Monty Hall Problem, named after the host. Okay, so the problem is, contestants were given a choice of one of 3 boxes, one containing a star prize and 2 containing a booby prize, for some reason usually goats. Contestant picks box, and Monty Hall will open one of the 2 boxes with a booby prize in, and then ask the contestant whether they wanted to swap or not. So do you swap or not, or doesn't it matter? Well, hopefully by now you've realised that the common sense answer is actually the wrong one. But for those who've never seen this one before, can you actually work out what the right answer is? So in summary, I appreciate that this is a difficult promise to ask you to make, but please remember the words of Christopher Hitchens. Take the risk of thinking for yourself. Much more happiness, truth, beauty, and wisdom will come to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I like this whole kind of Ignite game show format. That's good. That's all I'm going to have to do just the whole 5 minutes of like a complete game show. We'll get somebody up on stage and everything. You're going to have like 2 slides to get somebody on stage. Yeah, okay. Somebody work on that. That'll be awesome. Oh, nice. Everyone heard that, didn't they? That's Neil, put him down for the next Ignite. Cool. Right. Our next speaker is Ian Wilson, and he's going to be telling us about the changing face of science. See, I told you there was a lot of face-related things, and this is one of them. But yeah, it's going to be about science, really, isn't it? So, if you can welcome to the stage, Ian Wilson.
Right, hello, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm a PhD student studying genetics up at the University of Liverpool, and I thought I'd take you on a breathless tour, and believe me when I say that, I talk fast, of how science, public perception of science has changed throughout the years. So with 3 different topics mostly. So we're going to start off with science and religion, how they've impacted upon one another. So this has changed massively over the centuries, so what we're going to do is start way back with the ancients, specifically the Egyptians. Now, the Egyptians didn't have what we would call scientific understanding. They attributed pretty much everything that they saw to the gods, so things like the movement of the stars and planets. Whilst they lacked the scientific understanding, though, they did discover a hell of a lot just by observing these different phenomena and utilising them in their worship of the gods. So a brilliant example of this is Karnak Temple in Luxor. Now, on the winter solstice, the sun rises directly between the 2 pillars at the front of the temple, flooding the entire area with light to worship the sun god Amun-Re. So it's a brilliant example. But whilst the Egyptian architects and engineers were considered great minds, they were always second to the gods. That changed when the Greeks came along and came up with what we would call scientific methodology, and they realised that perhaps the gods aren't responsible for quite as much as everybody thought. So you had some great minds, geniuses even in their time, like Thales and Archimedes, but some of them did cause a lot of controversy, such as Hippocrates, who suggested that disease wasn't actually a divine punishment. Whilst they caused a lot of problems and uproar at the time, eventually people began to realise that science had a lot to offer in society. Despite this, centuries later, when Darwin comes along with his Origin of Species, it was still really controversial to suggest that the church or your religious teachings were wrong. And when he and other people with similarly controversial work came along, it caused people not just to question their religion, but also scientists. So the scientists around then had to work harder to try and answer the public's questions, which then drove society on further. So what goes around comes around, which is clearly what Justin Timberlake was singing about. So the next topic is going to be science and equality, specifically looking at whether men and women are represented equally in science. I would say not. I did a Google image search of scientists the other day, and then the guy who's about to come up on the left was the first hit. See, there he is. Closely followed by the guy wearing what looks like a giant electrified condom, which is slightly worrying. But basically, the idea is that women are underrepresented in scientific science. That image is what people stereotypically think of. And I think this is largely down to what's happened in the past. So if you take as a good example, James Watson and Francis Crick, generally regarded as the 2 people responsible for the discovery of the structure of DNA. What a lot of people don't realise is that 2 other people worked with them on this, Maurice Wilkins and Rosalind Franklin. Now, the 3 men got the Nobel Prize for the work. Rosalind Franklin, whose image on the right was what helped Watson and Crick discover the structure, had died before the Nobel Prize was awarded, so she didn't get it. Now, it's events like this, either accidental or intentional, that have sort of meant that women aren't seen as being scientists stereotypically. And I do wonder if this kind of thing is the problem, because that attitude seems ingrained in academia, and you have old fuddy-duddy professors going, oh no, we must have a man who knows what he's doing to take up the position. This kind of thing also is a big problem. This was done by the European Commission called Science is a Girl Thing, to try and attract women into science. And I mean, this, seriously, watch the video on YouTube, it'd be hilarious if it wasn't so tragic. But basically, they've got the idea completely wrong and haven't worked out with their audiences and how to speak to them. And that's something we need to get the hang of as we go into the future. Because you, as the public and taxpayers, are effectively funding our research. So, to my mind, you have the right to know what we're doing with your money and what research is going on. So, we need to try and get scientists talking to the public about their work transparently. Not everybody, though, is going to be good at that, and I'm not even going to say that, that I would be good at that kind of thing. We're not all suited to the public. I was walking down the road the other day, saw what can be described as a very ugly woman across the road, and then without thinking, just went, ugh. So, we're not all great with the public, but the right people can get the right message across. So, you've heard of the Brian Cox effect, where his programs have encouraged more people to study physics at university. Well, people like him and David Attenborough, they get the right message across, encourage people and make people interested in science, which will then question us and make us drive scientific research on further. And finally, I've got to say, we need to try and attract children to science as well, because they're going to be the next generation of scientists. We've got to try and make them see that it's interesting and exciting. Now, this competition named there, I took part in that, and it was great. You have kids talking to scientists and asking them questions. So we had one question I got was, is there such a thing as a sneasel, which apparently is a snail/turtle. But yeah, basically, we need to talk to people, try and get the word out about science and encourage them. Thank you very much.
That was a great talk, that in. And hopefully maybe some of the Liverpool Girl geeks, maybe some of them will be scientists, and that'll help kind of balance the gender inequality out a bit. That would be good. Our next talk is about, and I'm going to read this out of my notes because it's quite complicated and I'll get it wrong otherwise. It's about transcranial direct current stimulation. And maybe there'll need to be some audience participation for that one as well. I can see you'll just make a little queue over there if you want to take part in that. Sounds like it's going to be a very, interesting topic. And to tell us about this is Neil K. Sheridan.
Hi everyone. I'm going to take this opportunity to give a brief overview of a non-invasive brain stimulation technique called TDCS. That's transcranial direct current stimulation. There's been quite a bit of media interest in the topic recently. I don't know if any of you have seen. It's the potential of TDCS as a way to enhance ourselves, sort of enhance our memories and things, is perhaps being the attraction of it. So I've got a quick definition of TDCS and find out what it can do. TDCS involves delivering a weak direct electrical current to the scalp using electrodes. This alters the excitability of neurons by shifting their membrane potentials and thus making them more or less likely to fire. There are usually two electrodes involved. There's a positive anode, and this triggers an increase in neuron firing rate, and there's a negative cathode, which triggers a decrease in neuron firing rate. The next slide is going to show a comparison of neuron firing rate normally, and when someone is having TDCS done on them. You can see how the anode electrode has increased the firing rate of the neurons. Okay, well, that's how it's thought that TDCS works, but I've got to say it's not really fully understood. For instance, rather contradictorily, one study found that the anode actually decreased the neuron firing rate and the cathode increased it, which was the opposite to what we'd expect. Anyway, I was just going to say how to usually implement TDCS. We've got electrodes about 25 to 30 square centimetre area, The current involved is only 1 to 2 milliamps, so it's really, really small, as you'd hope. Safety-wise, usually the currents used is between 1 and 2 milliamps, and the consensus is that if it's done for less than 10 minutes, there aren't any ill effects. Most people experience perhaps a little skin tingling while it's happening, that's all. However, there's no research into regular long-term use of TDCS. And this is when people are applying the electrodes, they use the 10 to 20 system of EEG electrode placement to get the right areas on the scalp for the corresponding brain areas. Okay, some of the things that TDCS can be used for. It was first used in 1804 to treat melancholy patients. It was tried again in the mid-20th century in psychiatry, but it sort of fell out of favour because they got more excited about drugs instead. Now, over the last 10 years, it's been used both clinically and experimentally in a wide variety of things. And most recently, we've got it coming into the commercial market with these headsets. This one's aimed at gamers, and it's supposed to stimulate the prefrontal cortex to improve their gaming. Okay, there's some interesting more academic experiments. This one, they found anodal stimulation of the motor cortex for 10 minutes, produced a 15% reduction in neuromuscular fatigue. That's neuromuscular fatigue corresponds to a drop in our ability to use our muscles, really. So it's perhaps of interest to people who have muscle weakness, and you could imagine it could give athletes an edge as well. Second, there's the posterior parietal cortex. This enhanced participants' ability to detect targets in their visual fields. Again, that's something that might be interesting to video gamers, perhaps in shooting games, first-person shooters. And finally, there's a memory one, left prefrontal cortex. This was found a 1 milliamp anodal stimulation enhanced vehicle's performance in a working memory task. But it's quite interestingly, when we tried a higher current of 2 milliamps, there was no further increase in performance at all. And when we did it with a more difficult working memory task, the participants didn't show any enhanced performance at all with a TDCS. So what kind of, and people have been making their own DIY TDCSs. If you look on the internet, you can probably find some plans to make your own. If you want to follow it up, there's some references here, there's loads more to find out. As I said, it's a massive variety of different experiments have been done and are being done at the moment. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Neil. So I'll just expect somebody in the next Maker Night down at Does Liverpool to be kind of, trying to rig up one of the things with some sponges by the sink or something. It's kind of slightly more high-tech version of sticking your battery on your tongue, I suppose. Right, now, unfortunately, it comes to our last speaker of the evening. But hopefully we're going to go out on a kind of good note. And another face theme kind of talk coming up now, where Jenny Radcliffe is going to tell us how your face can't lie.
Hello. Hello. Evening, Ignite. Nice to be here on short, intellectual, and frankly slightly bonkers company. I'm going to talk to you about how facial expressions reveal our emotions and how your face can't lie. But of course you know, don't you, that that's not true. Because you can smile when you feel down and you can frown when actually you're not that angry. The thing is, the face versus the body, the face is the more reliable in terms of body language and in terms of lies. Not everything that you do with your face, but a few things that you do with your face, principally something called microfacial expressions, which involve the movement of the 43 muscles in the face in certain combinations. This is a horrible picture, but it just shows you the level of geekdom I operate at, because the way these move have codes and they reveal certain expressions. This work was done by a guy called Dr. Paul Ekman, who studied lots of different faces, including faces in New Guinea in a congenitally blind people. So scientifically proven that everybody, regardless of age, gender, ethnicity, culture or personality, has the same face when they experience 7 of these what we call universal emotions, which are disgust, fear, sadness, contempt, anger, surprise, and happiness. What that means is that no matter who you are, when your brain feels this emotion, your face expresses it. The first one being contempt involves this muscle, the buccinator, which causes this one-sided dimple on the side of the face. We do it now, mother-in-laws, and my mum is quite good at this, that one-sided dimple. You see me doing it quite extreme. And this is Maxie, who's 6, showing you the kids do it as well, so everybody does the same thing. If you do it now, think of something you look down on, morally superior to, that's contempt. That's contempt. That's contempt. Okay, now we look at fear. Kids are good at doing fear because their inner brows raise up. Okay, the lids tense and the lips corners stretch. I have no idea who this woman is, but it's a good fear. And this is Tiger Woods doing good fear, and this is a baby doing good fear. Max doesn't do good fear so well, you see, because it's quite difficult to fake micro-expressions. If you don't feel it, it doesn't look real. And you see, it doesn't really look that real. If you try and do it now, unless you're scared, it won't be believable. So if you try and pull your inner eyebrows in without the outer ones, and open your mouth to take in some oxygen for fear, it doesn't really work. Surprise is easier. This is the most quick of all the micro-expressions. The eyebrows go up in an arch, and the jaw drops. Like that. Max does really, really good fear. We'll see him do it just in a second. The thing about, oh, that's good surprise. The thing about surprise is if you see this on a face, they genuinely didn't know what you were telling them. but if it lasts more than a fraction of a second, it's fake. So if you've got gossip and you tell someone the gossip, and they don't pull this face, they knew, and they didn't tell you first. So surprise is a really good one. Disgust is good. This is the easiest one to recognise when you're not trained, because it's that wrinkle in the nose. If you all right now think of something horrible to eat that you've been served with, and you're joking, something horrible that you eat and you wrinkle your nose and bring your lip up, it's so often uncomfortable like that. And disgust is something that's really good in business, because if you see someone doing that disgust face, but they're telling you that they like what they're hearing, that shows that they're lying. Because the thing about facial expressions is, this is really what's going on in his head, regardless of what he tells you is going on in his head. Happy is an easy one. We see the lips go up to a big smile for me. They're all fake, okay? That's what you need. It's all in the eyes and in the crow's feet around the eyes. The cheeks are raised, the lip corners go up. Even in a baby, it's where the lip corners, the eye corners will go up. Max does good at happy, although it's difficult to fake. There are 16 types of smile, and only one of them is a genuine happy smile, and that's all in the twinkle in the eye. You know it when it's fake, and you'll see it often enough. Okay, and then we have anger. Now, I was really interested from a security point of view, what area I work in. Anger, it is in the lower brows. If you do need the lower brows, right now, it's an order, doing the lower brows. But the thing is, that's also a corrugator muscle come down. It's also the muscle of difficulty, okay? It's not bad anger, but it's in the lip, okay? So a microgram is all in the lip, and we're watching for it in airports, and it's also called the assassin's face. There are 19 variations, and all assassins and suicide bombers pull the same variation of this particular face with the brows, and the lip gives me anger. Sadness is difficult, because if you're not sad, it's hard to pull this face. We need to lower the outer corners of the lips, but not stick your lip out. You're all giving me a lip sticking out, which is not real. We couldn't go to Max for this one, we needed a sister, and this is what happens to a 2-year-old when you pull a juice cup off her. I'm not an animal, I gave her it back once I got the shot. Thank you very much. That's what she looks like. So sad's hard to do unless you are sad. I just want to leave you one thing, it's a Sherlock quote. Sherlock tells Watson, you see but you do not observe. You need to observe. Most people are asleep when they're awake. They don't look closely enough, they don't observe closely enough. And you should wake up and look for the truth, because it's written on all your faces. Thank you very much. That's me.
Thank you very much, Jenny. That was an excellent one to kind of finish on. And so now you can all compare, practice on each other when you say, did you like that talk? And you'll be able to tell whether they did or not. And then I presume you're all going to look sad, because that's the end of the evening now. So at least you all said the right thing. I can't really see your expression quite well enough from up here. So just before we go, there's a few kind of thanks and kind of wrap-up sort of things to do. So first, thanks to our sponsors, as Open Labs sponsor us, and there have also been some super sponsors on the ticketing page who've given us a bit of money to help run the event tonight. So that's Rachel Wright, Peter Goodbody, Martin Warren, and Mike McDade. So round of applause for our sponsors. And I'd like to thank all the people who kind of put the work in to make the event all happen, which is just, all these people who can make all this stuff kind of come together that I can just stand on stage and chat a bit. It's great. So there's Neil, Dan, Lydia, Andy, and Mandy, who've all just done a great job of putting the events together all the time. Now, the next Ignite is going to be on Thursday, the 14th of November. So, put that in your diary now. If you want to talk at it, we're always interested in finding new speakers. We've got a couple of people coming up with some ideas now. We've got a game show that you're going to have to go up against. But that it's all fine. It's a very friendly crowd. It's a great first event to speak at. So yeah, let Neil or one of the other organisers know if you want to give a talk. Go to igniteliverpool.com and there's a form or something, or a link, I don't know what.
Form!
There's a form, apparently, to fill in if you want to speak. Shows how much attention I pay to the website. Oops. But yeah, more speakers are always good. Tell your friends to come along to the next one. That'd be awesome. It's going to be, get yourselves a drink, chat a bit more, and kind of enjoy the rest of the evening. And I think for one final thing, just a big round of applause to all our speakers tonight. They've been awesome. And thank you all for coming. See you in November.
Kind of